Welcome, Campfire Crew. Let's get it on. Doppelganger, submitted by Eric the Sort of Great. Hey, thanks for responding to my email and letting me know you were going to do this topic. I'm not gushing and I'm not trying to kiss your ass, but I've emailed other horror narrators and they've never returned my questions. That makes you a good guy in my book. Anyway, I had never heard the term doppelganger until after this incident happened to me. My aunt and uncle and cousins were visiting my family for the holidays, and my one cousin was 7 years old. His older sister was 16. The family wanted to go out bowling, but I didn't feel like it, and my younger cousin, who I will call Stephen, was not feeling well. They asked if I would stay home and watch Stephen while they went out and had fun, and I figured, well, that gives me a chance to have a smoke, veg out on some Sega, and because Stephen wasn't feeling well, hey, he'd just be asleep. They thanked me for doing it, and all left for dinner around 5, and then were going bowling and wouldn't be back until close to 11. No sweat. I got Stephen into his guest bed, put a garbage can next to it in case he had to throw up, and made sure that he was okay and if he needed anything else. He was just very tired, was running a fever, and wanted to sleep. So after taking some medicine, he drifted off. I went to my bedroom, which was in the basement at the time. We were having some renovations done upstairs, so I had been relocated there while the workers did their thing. And if anyone asks, that room and another room were cordoned off and no one could get into them, so no one was at risk of getting hurt, or coming and going out of them. I'm just putting that out there. So, I go to my room, crack open a window, fire up a Marlboro, and bust out some Altered Beast. I freaking love that game. I was playing away, and I got the idea that maybe a beer or two would go well with this cigarette. So I went over to our extra refrigerator we kept in the basement that held stuff for parties like extra beer and soda, etc. Mind you, I was 17 at the time of this, so while my parents allowed me to have a beer now and again, I really shouldn't have been doing what I was doing. Oh well, call me a rebel or whatever. It was just what me and my friends did, and none of us got in trouble, so whatever. I was playing away and having a really good time when I heard someone walking on the hardwood floors right above me. I paused the game and went upstairs to see if Stephen was moving around or if he needed something, but there was no one there, so I ran upstairs to check on Stephen, and he was laying in his bed, totally asleep. I went back to my room, had another cigarette, and played more of my game, and then moved on to Rocky. I had another beer, and right when I had cracked it open, I heard footsteps above me again. I jumped up, went upstairs, and looked around, and there was Stephen walking through our dining room to the front of our house to the family room. I called out to him, "Hey, Steve, are you okay? You need something? You feeling better?" He didn't say anything to me and kept walking, so I followed him, clearly seeing him from the back wearing the same clothes that he was wearing when I put him in bed. He made the turn from the dining room to the family room, so I started walking quicker to catch up to him. When I got into the family room, I saw him going down the stairs to our front foyer where he opened the door and walked outside. I yelled out, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" and ran for the door. It was still open a crack, and when I flung it open and looked out onto our porch, there was nobody there. I went out onto the porch and looked all around my yard and driveway. There was no sign of Stephen. I was perplexed to say the least, so I went back inside, shut the door, and ran upstairs again, popped into the guest room, only to see Stephen still totally asleep. I should say at this point that I know what I heard upstairs was there because my dog was in my room with me, and when I noticed the sounds and looked over at him, he was already looking up like he had heard it both times as well. My dog did not come upstairs with me when I saw what I thought was Stephen walking through the house. I don't know why. Just then, Stephen woke up and looked at me, and I asked him if he was feeling okay and why he was walking around the house. He said he hadn't been walking around the house, and the only time he had gotten out of bed was to go to the bathroom a few minutes after I had left the room in the first place. I just shook my head and asked him if he was okay. He said he was still feeling kind of rotten, so I took his temperature and he still had the fever. I got him some cold water and told him to just rest and again call if he needed anything. He fell back asleep, and that was that. I know some people may say, well, you did have a couple of beers, but no, I had really only had one, and I don't remember beer ever making you see people walking around that are not really there. I, for the life of me, can't explain what that was all about. My family came home later, and I didn't mention it to anybody. As a matter of fact, I never told anybody until just a few years ago, and this happened over 30 years ago. When I did say something, that's when the term doppelganger came up, and I thought, wow, did I see my cousin's doppelganger walking around my house? And from what I've read up on it, doppelgangers are supposed to be forewarners of death. Stephen certainly did not die. He got over his little bout of the flu and is a fine man with a family today. Anyway, I just wanted to share that story. If anyone out there has any thoughts or comments on this, I would love to hear them. He wouldn't stop calling. While in my last year at uni, I was trying to earn a little extra money and decided to post ads online for babysitting and dog walking services in my local area. Most people with ads on there had a picture of themselves, and so did I, logic being that parents would want to check out potential babysitters by appearance too. Most people put contact numbers on there too, so I also did that, thinking it might give potential customers more points of contact than just messaging through the ad site. So, within about 45 minutes of posting this ad, I'm downstairs cooking dinner and I hear my phone ringing in my bedroom, but I'm tied up with hot pans on the stove, etc. So I left it, annoyed that I had missed a potential customer. However, I hear my phone ringing again, and again, and again. I dash up as soon as I can free myself from cooking and go and pick up the phone. When I pick up, all I can hear is heavy breathing. So naturally, after I didn't get a reply, I hung up. The phone rang again as soon as I put it down. I picked it up again, and eventually, a guy replies. He starts off normal, and I figured that perhaps it had just been a bad line before. He explains that he has 2 kids under 5, and then asks me if I think I can handle them. Having experience with some pretty shitty behaved kids in the past, I say yes. He then asks me if I stay overnight when babysitting, and this pulled up a red flag in my mind, and I firmly said no. After that, he went silent again, and all I heard is his heavy breathing. I asked if he was still there, and he suddenly says, "Are you a virgin?" I hung up. The phone kept ringing and ringing and ringing for another hour non-stop. He had withheld his number, so I couldn't specifically block that number. But then I found the function to block withheld numbers on my phone, and did it, deleted my number from the ad site, and then proceeded to message every other person on there in my area with a babysitting ad to warn them. Turns out, some of them had similar experiences. I would never have fallen for the "do you stay overnight" part, but it made me shudder to think of teenagers or vulnerable adults falling for it, and what could have happened to them. If he hadn't withheld his number, I would have reported him in an instant. I felt so unsafe and was jumping at shadows for the rest of that evening. My Time as a Nanny, submitted by Ariel. All I'm going to say about where this happened was it was near Miami. I had dropped out of college after my sophomore year because I didn't want to spend any more money on a degree I wasn't sure I really wanted, and I didn't want to waste any more time trying to figure out what I really wanted to do. I thought long and hard about staying in my job as a waitress/hostess, and then heard about becoming a nanny. I looked into it, and thought it was interesting, and decided to move forward with it and applied for a job. There was some training involved and a lot of background checks, but I was accepted into the agency and very quickly placed with a family. I was blown away. This family was loaded beyond my wildest dreams. Yes, it was about an hour away from home, but there was no way I couldn't take this job. I was to watch 2 kids all day long, even though the mom was a stay-at-home mom. It was 2 boys, both aged 4. They were twins. She spent most of her days at the gym, coffee shop, shopping, lunch dates with friends, and was also involved with a local charity, so she was rarely at home. So much for being a stay-at-home mom. The father had his own business and was extremely busy with that. I didn't know exactly what it was, and I didn't see him as much as I saw the mother. He was away on business trips quite frequently. The times I did spend with him, though, he was very nice to me. Their house was insane. I couldn't tell you the exact square footage, but it had to be at least 15 or 20,000 square feet. There were like 12 bedrooms and 10 bathrooms, 2 separate den offices, a couple of different living rooms, a 6-car garage, a separate garage for even more cars, and an entire back house, which was mine. Even that had 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, 2 bathrooms, and immediate access to a massive in-ground pool. Okay, I know this is a lot of backstory, but it's kind of important. So my job went. I watched the 2 boys every day, and they were not in preschool for whatever reason. And I was required to do these teaching modules with them, and I think that's what the mother thought was adequate before they went to kindergarten the next year. It was a good job. I liked being with the kids. As I said, the father was extremely nice to me, and the mother was extremely fair as well. I even had use of one of their cars. I shit you not, a Maserati. I was given excellent time off in the evenings and on the weekends, and when they went on holiday trips, I went with them at no charge. Didn't take care of the kids the entire time, and was always given extra spending money to do whatever I wanted to for at least 2 or 3 days on these 2-week trips. So far, this sounds like a fucking paradise, right? Well, while I was watching the kids one day, there was a buzz from the driveway gate. I was busy with the kids in their basement playroom, and the maid, a woman named Maria who did not speak English very well, apparently buzzed this person in, thinking it was a delivery of some kind. I thought that was odd, because most deliveries went to a different building for holding until the father or mother got home. So, I'm playing with the kids, and I hear a noise from upstairs and down the hall at the front door, and Maria starting to yell in Spanish very loudly, and then she screamed. I looked at the kids and told them to stay put, and I would be right back. I went upstairs and looked down the hallway to see 3 guys in black suits standing in front of Maria. One was talking to her in Spanish, and the other 2 were behind him, and I couldn't miss the fact that they were both holding handguns. From my vantage point, I could see through the back living room/dining room atrium windows that there were 4 other guys in the backyard, all also in dark suits, all also holding handguns. I immediately backed up, closed the door softly, went downstairs and grabbed the kids, went to the far end of their playroom. They had one of those little plastic playhouses there, and I told them that we were going to have a tea party inside. We went in. I was freaking out, but I didn't want them to freak out alongside me, so it was very hard to keep all this in. I had no idea what was going on, but the sight of those guns was scaring the shit out of me. Suddenly, I heard another scream again from upstairs, and a lot of shouting from the mother. She had just come home and walked in on all of this, and I'm sure she was also freaking out due to her screams. I heard footsteps racing all throughout the house very quickly, with the continued screaming of Maria and the mother. I heard the basement door open, and footsteps come down the hallway, and the sound of 2 men talking while going room to room looking for something. I was holding my breath and telling the kids to be as quiet as they could, when the door to the playroom popped open, and through the playhouse window, I saw 2 men coming straight into the room with their guns out, looking around. One obviously caught my eye, came straight over to the playhouse and ripped the door open. Both of the boys didn't scream, but just looked wide-eyed up at this intense-looking man of what I assume was Spanish or Puerto Rican heritage. In hindsight, as fucking scared as I was, I have to admit he was actually very handsome. I know, I'm a fucking maniac. He looked me in the eye and simply said, "Nanny?" I don't know a lot of Spanish, but I knew what he was asking, and I held on to the two boys and vigorously shook my head up and down and said, "Yes, yes, 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 Nanny, Nanny, Nanny." He sort of smiled, put his gun down, said something to the other guy, and they both backed out of the room and closed the door. I heard the footsteps retreat back upstairs, and lots more shouting and screaming. I was so scared I had pissed my pants, and the kids noticed and started giggling. Well, they were 4 years old, and they had zero idea of what had just happened. So, what had happened? Well, the father was actually a drug dealer or some kind of money launderer for a drug dealer. I don't really know the details. These gentlemen were there to find him or whatever it was they were looking for. That's the basic gist of what I got, but I wasn't told much, and I didn't ask a lot of questions for obvious reasons. When I knew all of the men had left the house, I took the kids upstairs to the mother, who was crumpled up on a living room couch, crying into her iPhone. I sat the kids next to her, looked for Maria, who was crumpled over into the kitchen, also crying while she was sitting on the floor. I stood there for a minute before realizing I had to change my clothes. So I went back to the house that I stayed in, changed my clothes, got cleaned up, and I immediately started putting all of my things into my bags, as there was no way in hell I was staying there for one more fucking minute. The mother came up to talk to me and kept reassuring me that something like this would never happen again and that everything was okay and we were safe. I told her that I loved her kids very much, but there was no way I could be involved with a family like this despite the money and my love for the kids. I got my things together, called a friend to pick me up, called the agency and quit on the spot and with no reason given to them, and then went home to my parents, like I said, an hour away. I told them everything that had happened, and they hugged me extra tight and told me that I did the right thing. Despite repeated calls from the mother, I did not go back no matter how much money they offered me, and believe me, they offered me a considerable raise. So, there's no monsters or crazy kids or anything like that in my story, but dear God, I have never been that scared in my entire life. I went back to my job in the restaurant, enrolled in community college, and put it all behind me. I have not heard from those people in over 3 years, and I'm planning on moving to Denver soon. Thank you for telling my story if you do. Damn, I'm getting chills just thinking about that guy opening that playhouse door with a gun drawn, staring into my eyes, thinking how close to death I may have come. The pounding wouldn't stop. When I was in high school, I spent about a week babysitting 2 kids in their house while their parents were away on business. Although I lived in a fairly rural area, the family lived within 10 minutes of my house, and I knew the neighborhood pretty well as I had babysat for the family before. It was late October, Halloween weekend, and as a typical 17-year-old, I was disappointed I was not out with my friends, and instead stuck inside babysitting. It was just about bedtime for the kids, so it was pitch black outside and silent. Again, very rural area, and this makes this encounter that much creepier. The house I was sitting had a large backyard and a sort of garage that had been converted to an apartment. A young man lived in the apartment, but the family was insistent that he never came to the house and would not bother me. As I was putting the kids to bed, the doorbell rang. Since I knew my family and friends were out for Halloween, I opened the front door without thinking. It was my best friend, who also lived nearby, so she knew the house I was staying at. She had a couple of our guy friends with her and explained that they were on their way to the corn mazes and wanted to just stop by and say hi. Grateful to see them before they went, we hung out in the kitchen for probably 20 minutes before they went on their way. By that time, the kids were asleep upstairs, so I went around the house and locked all of the doors and closed all of the blinds. It was a pretty modern-style home, so an entire side of the house was just straight windows. After I got the house ready, I settled down in the living room to watch TV. Probably around 30 minutes or so passed, when I heard a knock at the front door. It was faint, so I turned off the TV to hear it better. Hearing the knock again, I could feel the hairs on my arms stand up. It was pretty late, and I had no idea who would be coming to the house at this hour. Suddenly, the faint knock turned into a violent, loud banging. Running on adrenaline, I sprinted upstairs into the master bedroom. I didn't have a cell phone at the time, and knowing there was a phone in the room, I figured it would be safer to be near a phone and the kids. Now, not only is the door being pounded on, but the doorbell is being rung over and over again. Insistently. I pound my house number into the phone, and my mom picks up. I panically told her what was going on downstairs. She gave the phone to my dad, and he said he'd be right there. Relieved, I clutch the phone in my hand and go out to the landing to check on the kids. The oldest was standing outside her door, confused and afraid. I quickly told her it was just my dad coming to check on us and to go back into her room and go back to bed. After she went back in her room, I rushed downstairs to make sure the doors were still locked. Running past the wall of windows to get to the door, suddenly all of them started shaking violently. I'm absolutely terrified at this point. I run to the TV room and look for something I could use as a weapon. Suddenly, the ringing and pounding just stopped. I sit there, stunned in absolute silence. Then, a single doorbell ring shatters the silence and makes me practically jump out of my skin. Feeling a rush of relief upon realizing it was my dad, I rushed to open the door. There was nobody there. I slammed the door shut and run to grab the phone, and I called my house again. "Mom," I whispered, "is Dad here?" She tells me he can't find the car keys and hasn't even left yet. I felt the blood run out of my face. I'm crying hysterically at this point, so my mom stays on the phone with me and tells me when my dad finally leaves. I see a pair of headlights come tearing through the dark. The sheer speed of the car told me it was my dad. I threw open the front door and ran out. Suddenly, from around the corner, 3 shadows came out. My dad, wielding a baseball bat at this point, ran towards the shadowy figures, screaming and waving his arms. The closer they get, I realize it was my friends. Instead of going to the corn maze, they decided it would be fun to scare me on Halloween. I felt a rush of relief and anger. My dad bitched them out, and although I did not get a lot of sleep that night, I was happy to know it was just my friends. I know, this story has kind of a lame ending, but it was honestly the scariest moment of my life. The New Guy, submitted by Onerous45. Okay, so when I was 14, I took a job with a family on a street over from me, babysitting their 2 kids who were 5 and 7. They were good kids, a boy and a girl, and I stayed at that job for the next 2 years because the pay was good, the kids were low maintenance, and I really liked the way the family took care of me. They were friends with my parents too, so there were a lot of reasons to stay. Like I said, it was a good job. Nearly every day in the summer and lots of weekends throughout the year. Plus, they had a pool, so that was a huge bonus. Sometimes my friends would come over with the parents' permission, and how can you tell a teenage girl that's spending a day in the sun with 2 well-behaved kids and your BFFs to leave a job like that? The summer that I turned 16, however, things changed and not for the better. Unbeknownst to me, the mother and father had not been getting along for quite some time and were actually going through a divorce. Long story short, and I found this out later, Mom had been cheating on the father. He left the house, and I'm sure it was not an easy time, but it was about to get weirder and scarier for me. In June, a new guy, I presume the man the Mom was cheating with, started to spend a lot of time at the house and would sometimes show up when I was babysitting, looking for the Mom. That was a little red flag, but without jumping to conclusions, I was wondering why he would stop over in the middle of the day when he had to know the Mom was at work. After a couple of times of this in the same week, one of my friends brought it up as odd. Just as she was saying this, she looked over my shoulder, and we were sitting out by the pool watching the kids play with their floaties, and she said, He's here, and he has a camera." I popped up, and there he was at the gate by the side of the house taking pictures of us. He realized we saw him and immediately came over, trying to tell us he was taking shots of the backyard for a landscaper. He was doing it as a favor for the mom. As creepy as it was, it sounded believable, and he took a few more and then said goodbye and left. When the mom got home from work that afternoon, I gave her my report, got my weekly pay, and I kind of brought it up without making a huge issue about it. She looked puzzled for a minute, but then said, "Oh, I did ask him to take some pictures of the fence." Still, I felt like it was weird. I mean, he was pointing the camera right at us when my friend noticed him. I didn't go back to babysit until that Monday, and not much happened over the weekend, except a strange account tried to connect with me on my Twitter and Snapchat. I didn't recognize them, but my friend called me Sunday to say the same thing happened to her. She did accept and said it was some guy from our school just trying to connect over the summer. Okay, fine. Monday came, and I got back to my little guys, and all was well. I brought them inside from the pool to play some games while I made them lunch before we did our summer reading and took a nap. And while I was making sandwiches, I saw an envelope of photos on the counter. Two things took me aback. One, who develops photos anymore? And, I wonder if those were the ones the new guy had taken. Curious, I opened the already open package, and it was the fence and stuff. However, I looked at the thumbnail strip, and there were a whole bunch of photos of me and my friend. One of them was of me bending over, and my swimsuit, was crawling up there, if you know what I mean. My stomach was in knots, and I put everything back, and I was going to tell my parents about this, as well as the mom. I couldn't figure out who to tell first. I know, I was just a kid. For the rest of the afternoon, that was all I could think of despite taking care of my kiddos. We were out by the pool when Mom came home, so I decided to tell her about the photos. I simply went to the package, but when I went to get the thumbnail strip, it wasn't in there. I made up some stupid excuse about a part of the fence I thought looked like it was falling down and just got out of there. Where the hell did that strip go? I called my friend and told her about it, and she didn't really know what to tell me. I was getting weirded out and couldn't tell my parents or the mom if there was no evidence, so I just sat on it and tried to get on with the summer. That weekend, the mom asked if I could watch the kids last minute that Saturday night. I was on the fence, but when she said $100 for the night, I couldn't say no. She had a work party she forgot about and would be back around midnight. 5 hours and $100? Yeah, not turning that down. In retrospect, I wish I had. I got to the house, played with the kids, and then got them to bed after doing the Disney thing, and then went back to the couch to text my friends and watch TV on in the background. It was about 11 o'clock when the back door opened, and in came the new guy. He came over to me asking about a specific jacket that the mom had asked him to come home from the party to get for her. Okay, now I've got a big red flag. That just seemed weird. I texted the mom to ask her if everything was okay and what jacket did she need, but I got no response. He was now standing over by the closet saying it's not there and maybe it's in her room. I text her again. No response. He calls out if I know the jacket he's talking about, and frankly, I do know the one. But I'm getting kind of nervous about him being there and me being there alone. I texted my friend as fast as I could and noticed that everything had gone quiet. I got up to see what he was doing, and for a minute I thought maybe he was robbing the place or something. But I saw the lights on in the mom's master suite, which was on the first floor. And when I poked my head in, I could see him standing in the walk-in closet. I went over to him and said, "Isn't she coming home at midnight? I mean, it's getting close to that. Maybe you should just go get her." He turned around, yanked me into the closet, and shut the door. I started to swing around, but he put his hand over my mouth and pulled me into her clothes and started groping me. I mean, he was grabbing my breasts, he was putting his hand between my legs and squeezing my butt. I could smell the booze on his breath, and I was in total panic mode. But in the back of my mind, I remember what my dad told me, and he's an ex-Marine and super huge into fitness. I remembered the lesson he told me, balled up my fist, and smashed it into his package, and he let go of me. I kicked at the side of his knee as hard as I could, and he fell down. I ran out of the closet and flew upstairs, locking myself in the kids' room and telling them to get into their closet. The poor things were still asleep and had no idea what was going on. I called the mom on my cell phone, and she answered, but the noise of the party was so loud, I just screamed at her to get home. I hung up and called my mom, and she was frantic. My friend had already called her, and my dad was on his way over. The kids were now crying, and I was shaking violently and crying, and I heard loud footsteps downstairs and my dad calling out for me. I didn't move or say anything until I heard him race upstairs and was right outside the door asking if I was inside. I got out of the closet, ran to the door, opened it, and jumped into his arms, freaking out and crying. My mom came running up too and hugged me, and then ran to the still crying kids and tried to comfort them. The new guy was nowhere to be found. My dad called the police, and just as they were pulling up, the mom pulled up in someone else's car who had given her a ride home as fast as they could. She ran up to us and then slipped and fell down. She was drunk as a skunk. The police asked me all kinds of questions and finally had to separate the mom because she kept interrupting and, quite frankly, was hysterical. I told them everything that had happened, including the pictures and the missing thumbnails, all of it. They caught the guy that night driving back to his apartment and got him just before he went inside. The police were at the house for quite a while that night, and my mom stayed the night there to watch over the kids, as their mom was on the verge of passing out and would have been little assistance in any emergency. To this day, I don't know why the police allowed that, but I guess they knew better or something, or just trusted us. Dad took me home and stayed with me in our living room until I fell asleep, exhausted. The next day, the police came by our house and told my dad some interesting things. The guy had placed cameras all over the house and outside and had been watching me every time I was there. That's how he knew I found the pictures. He snuck back into the house and took out what he thought was incriminating. He was also the same person that contacted me and my friend posing as a student in our school. What a creep. They wanted to know if we wanted to press charges, and we said yes, and we did. Throughout all the ordeal, we found out that the mom did ask about this jacket because she was feeling a little cool in the summer air, and he just left on his own and never really told her that he wasn't there. He obviously had other plans. He was later sentenced to 2 years for sexual assault and is now a registered sex offender. All that took a while, and I thought 2 years was a little light, but I don't know, I don't understand the law. As for the mom, she tried to come over the next day this all happened, and while I know none of this was directly her fault, my parents forbade her from seeing me. She had a check for $300 for me and a letter saying about how sorry she was. I accepted both. After that, I still watched my little guys for 2 weeks, but at my house, and my mom would pick them up and drop them off until other arrangements could be made. One evening, our doorbell rang, and it was the 2 kiddos crying and telling me they were going away, and they wanted to say goodbye. I hugged them and kissed them over and over and told them that I loved them and it was going to be okay. And that was the last I saw or heard from them. That was 5 years ago. I loved those kids so much, but I could never step in that house again. I got a job at Chick-fil-A after that and have never been babysitting since. What was in the house? Submitted by Adaptive Reasoner. This happened back in 1985 when I was a junior in high school. I was babysitting for a little boy in my neighborhood whom I'd watched a number of times before this. He would always get excited for me over his other sitters because I always made popcorn and played his favorite board games. I guess the others just wanted to watch TV. Anyway, it was a Saturday night, and I remember it was storming pretty well. Rain, that was. It was spring right before summer, as I recall. It was warm out, but there was the rain. We were playing Candyland and munching on popcorn when I heard a loud thump come from the basement. Let me explain. This was a fairly new development we lived in, so the houses had just been built. This wasn't the typical creepy old house. Their basement was fairly open and had a ping pong table and some chairs outside of the regular stuff people acquire in their basements. He didn't notice the sound, so I blew it off and just played the game. A few minutes later, I heard it again. This time he said, and I'll call him Tommy for this story, "What was that?" I said I didn't know, but I'd go check. I went down the stairs to the basement after flicking on the lights. There was nothing down there. All was well. I shrugged and went back upstairs. It was getting to be around 9:30 and time for him to go to bed, so I took him upstairs, turned his radio on to the local soft rock station, and told him to call me if he needed anything. He was out by 10 or so after he read a comic. I went back downstairs and cleaned things up, and heard more thumps, this time like 3 in a row. I stopped what I was doing and again went down in the basement through the door off the kitchen. Nothing. I stood and waited for about 5 minutes, and still nada. I went back upstairs and went to watch TV for the rest of the night, but around 10:45 I heard Tommy call out to me. I went up and asked him what was wrong, and he said there was something strange in his closet making noises. I went into the room and turned on the lights and looked around. The closet was closed, and I went over to it and looked inside. Just like the basement, there was nothing in there. I told him everything was fine and that he probably just dreamed he had heard something. I tucked him back in and went to leave the room, and right as I got to the door and turned off the light, a loud thumping came from the closet. Tommy screamed and jumped out of bed and ran towards me, and I took his hand and pulled him out of the room and shut the door. At the end of their hallway was a built-in linen closet, and as we stood there looking at each other, the doors to it slammed open, and towels and bedsheets came flying out onto the floor. Now I yelled and pulled Tommy towards the stairs. We were getting out of there. We got to the living room, and I had him sit on the couch while I tried to contact his parents, who were at some kind of dinner dance at a hotel. I had the front desk person assure me they would try to track them down for me and have them call me back. I turned on a funny movie to try to lighten the mood, and that's when the lights started flickering, and the banging started both upstairs and downstairs. The lights all went off. I screamed, and the TV went from the movie to a bright light that kept getting brighter and brighter, so I covered Tommy's eyes and shut mine as tight as I could. But then, just like that, everything stopped. The lights came on, the TV was fine, the pounding stopped. I was going crazy trying to keep it together, and finally thought to call my parents, but when I tried, I just got a busy signal. I took Tommy by the hand again and went to the back door. We could stay out on the porch until his parents came home. They had an awning, and like I said, it was warm enough, and the rain wouldn't have bothered us. But the sliding glass door wouldn't open. I checked the lock. It was flipping up and down easily, but the door wouldn't budge. I went over to the back door. The knob turned, but that door wouldn't open. I banged on it out of frustration and started crying, and then went back to Tommy. We tried the front door, the door to the garage. None of them would open. We could not get out of this house. I hugged him and told him it was going to be okay. But then this cracking sound, really loud cracking sound, came from the basement. We just stood there silent, listening. And the pounding started up again, so loud that it began to shake the floor. And then this deep-throated laugh started to go through the entire house, and by this time we're both really crying, and I'm yelling for whatever it is to go away and leave us alone. Things were really out of control. All of the lights went off again, and for a minute there was silence. Then all of the doors in the house, including the bedrooms, the cupboards, everything slammed open and shut, not once but twice. And we felt this massive wind rush through the living room so heavy that it knocked us back onto the couch. There was one more loud bang, and then the lights came on. It was dead silent. We sat there for a long time, just breathing heavily, scared out of our wits. I remember saying a prayer, telling Tommy we were going to be fine, and I got up and checked the front door. It opened without a problem. I grabbed Tommy by the hand once again and headed for the back deck when the phone rang. It was his parents asking what was wrong. They'd been trying to call, and the line was busy. I didn't know what to tell them. I just burst into tears again and begged them to come home. Tommy's dad said they were on their way, and we went outside to wait for them. Tommy kept asking me what had happened and what that was, and I just kept saying, "I don't know, honey, I don't know. But you're safe, I've got you." His parents got home about 20 minutes later and of course wanted to know what the hell had happened. Tommy tried to tell them, but was still so scared he was blubbering, so Mom took him to bed. I told his dad everything that had happened, but he just looked at me skeptically, and then accused me of watching horror movies and letting my imagination get away with me. And then he got mad and asked how the hell I could have let such a young child watch that kind of trash. I mean, he really started yelling at me, and I started crying again, trying to get him to believe me. Just then, Tommy's mom came down and asked about the linen closet and why all the stuff was strewn all over the hallway. And I said, "See?" They both just looked at me, and then they heard the thump start from the basement. He ran downstairs, followed by us, and the thumping didn't stop. It was coming from a back wall where there was now a huge crack. It started on the wall, ran down to the floor. He stood looking at it, and the thumping got louder, and then abruptly stopped. He told us to go upstairs. We did, and the mom fumbled for her purse, paid me my money, and told me to just go home. She wasn't being a bitch. I think she was trying to protect me. I don't know why I thought that, and still do, but that's how I feel. I never babysat there again, and I don't think I ever talked to that family after that. I do know they moved away not too long after this happened, and none of my friends ever babysat there either. Looking back, I always think, was the mother into some kind of weird satanic or witchcraft stuff that caused something like that to happen? I don't know. Nobody else in my neighborhood ever complained about anything like that happening. I told my parents and all my friends about what I had seen and heard that night, but I'm pretty sure no one believed me or believes me now if I were to tell them again. But that really happened to me. I don't know what it was, but I've never been through anything like that, ever, again. Hey gang, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have a scary story you'd like to have narrated on this channel, send it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Please visit my website for all things Uncle Josh True Scary Stories, truescarystories.net. I'll be updating my blog this week, and you can also find ways to support this channel. Just click on the support button. Also, if you're interested, check out my store. There's links to that in the description below, and of course at my website. I hope you are all well, and I look forward to bringing you more true scary stories. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.